Hello again. This will be yet another video inspired by Sydney Watson. Sunlight. I'm going to melt. No, I'm not. Pint of water. Drink a lot of water. Remember that, people. Let's talk about the current push for inclusion and diversity in the gaming industry. Let me just outwardly state, I have absolutely no problem with diversity and inclusion being pushed in games of a contemporary or future nature. I would love the Star Trek universe where race and sexual orientation don't matter. That would be my ideal future for humanity. Okay? I'll just state that here and now. But what makes me feel uncomfortable, and film and television are getting this way as well, is when inclusion and diversity is shoehorned into a historical setting. I am going to be talking about two specific games, both by the same publisher, that I have extensive knowledge about. And I have extensive knowledge about the periods they are set in. So I will stick with what I know best. Okay? Right. First of all, I will talk about Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I did actually complete this game. I was very late to the party on it because I have a very limited income, so I had to wait for it to drop in price considerably. I've always had a fascination with ancient Greece, ever since I was a boy. And their mythology's wild. Gods turning into golden showers and swans to mate with humans. Whoa! Nightlife must have been very sophisticated at times in ancient Greece. Right. First of all, let's talk about my main issues, especially on a playthrough with the wonderful Cassandra, who for me is the standout of the two main characters. I find Alexios irritating. Sorry, voice actor, I do apologise. Now, I will not talk about the more minor city-states because I have very hazy knowledge about how they were run. We will talk about the two main city-state protagonists in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Athens and Sparta. We will talk about Athens first, as it is the first city you visit. As Cassandra, you have this big pan out across the beauty that is classical Athens, and it is awesome and I love it. It is so well done. It really is. But here is where we come across our first problem. Cassandra, wearing full armour, wanders through a city where men, women and children are milling about without a care in the world. My main source for what I am about to talk about is Tom Holland, but I have seen corroboration from many female historians. He writes a very good book called Persian Fire, which most of my information will be coming from. He's well respected in his field. He gets very good reviews for his books. It's why I'm using him as a source. Now, yes, Athens gave us democracy. It wasn't quite what it is these days. They also gave us a word that is very much on vogue amongst race and gender activists, ostracised. Because every year the people would get to vote on issues of prominent politicians who were usually at loggerheads. The idea was they wrote their name on small shards of pottery, because Athens was famous for its pottery. I think it had a street called the Ceramicus. And the man who had the most shards, which were known as ostrakoi, was exiled from the city. Sometimes for life, sometimes for a decade, whatever was decided. It was a way of sorting out political rivalries and power struggles, hopefully without blood being shed. This was quite progressive for the times. Now we get to the real sticking point. It was well known in Athens at the time that apart from the working class and slaves, who could pretty do much what they pleased within reason, Athenian women were supposed to stay behind closed doors, and if they had to venture out, they would keep their heads covered. No man was allowed to look at another man's wife. So all sounds a bit like a certain mainstream religion, doesn't it, these days? Well, the extreme versions of it. So Cassandra would have actually wandered into an Athens where men and boys were milling about, but women were just quietly either hooded and shuffling around, or there may have been a few slaves, and she would have been being looked at, ridiculed, possibly even challenged or even prosecuted for daring to be bareheaded, for daring to be a warrior, for daring to be outspoken. I think maybe what they should have done, it even went to the extent that apparently one Athenian politician proposed that any woman who was seen out on the streets without a man was a legitimate target for cruising for prostitution. What we would call sex work these days. That is how progressive Athens was when it came to female rights. So I would have liked to have seen at least some reference to this within the game. Like maybe a male gate guard challenges Cassandra as a disgrace, or says, how much do you charge? Or something like that. And Cassandra then kicks his ass. And maybe comments being made by civilians towards Cassandra. And women who aren't working class or slaves or sex workers being, seen shuffling around in hoods and stuff. And maybe Cassandra could have made a commentary on this, on how this has to change. But no, instead we get a totally different representation in an otherwise very historically accurate game of what life in ancient Athens was like. So much else in the game is so spot on. There is a fort in, I think it's Argos, or the territory further down from it. Fort Tiryns, I think it's called. Tiryns. The precise modelling from the actual location in modern Greece is awesomely done. It really is. It is fantastic. And I remember sneaking around a Spartan camp and hearing this conversation going on between Spartan soldiers, where one said there was this merchant from Macedonia he was trying to sell me these really long spears. I don't know why I slipped into a German accent there. Although the Spartans did have certain similarities to a certain mid-20th century fascist ideology. We'll go there in a minute. And he was talking about the later development of basically the Macedonian pike. So that was brilliant historical referencing as far as I'm concerned. Brilliant. I loved it. That's why I loved the game. Man, it was awesome. Gameplay was awesome too. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. So I'm not knocking it for anything else than its alarming historical inaccuracies when it comes to the treatment of the sexes. So now let's go to Sparta. They weren't Scottish. I love the inclusion of the Spartan kick as a move, though. That is class. Now here we have a little less shoehorning. It is true from my sources that women had a lot more freedom to speak their mind in Spartan society, and also they were allowed to exercise semi-naked in public, and it was not frowned upon. But very much like a certain mid-20th century fascist ideology led by a very short man with a moustache, women were basically seen, even the noble ones, as baby-making machines to feed the Spartan war machine. That is all they were. So yet again, a character like Cassandra would have been stigmatized, challenged, possibly prosecuted for daring to be a warrior. Because fundamentally this went against the Spartan ideal. So overall, in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, one side of the coin, the homosexuality, the male was allowed to do as he pleased. I have no problem with the male character being able to have homosexual affairs, flirt with men, that kind of thing. That is absolutely fine. So if you like, ancient Greece got half of the equation right. Just as Ubisoft were getting half the equation right in the game. Fine with that. Right, let's move on to Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Now, I was somewhat less happy with the historical accuracy of this game. I have yet to do a full playthrough. Because of the weather in the UK at the moment, I spend most of my time outside. Gaming has become a lower priority than it was. I will be talking mostly about the male playthrough because that is what I'm doing. Right. Now, yet again, from sources, The Northman's Fury is a very good book. I can't remember the author. I mean, I have many, many sources that are historical rather than just watching movies and TV. Distracted. I'm a little rash. I always have been. Right. Where should we start? Male playthrough and homosexuality is where we'll start. Now, from what I have read, I know there are arguments that say gods like Loki were blatantly bisexual and shape-shifting. Okay, that's fair enough. It's fair enough. But these were the gods. From what I have read, in Norse society, they had this really weird, hypocritical way of looking at male homosexuality. In that if you were the dominant member of such a partnership, that was seen as fine. Almost like some male animals will actually ride another male animal to express their dominance. But if you were on the bottom of this equation, you were seen as the lowest of the low, a prison bitch, basically. So, for instance, in the East Anglia section of the game, where one of the Viking brothers you have to deal with basically propositioned you, I think maybe there should have been some exchange of insults. I'll only do that if I'm on top. And if that brother was willing to submit to being the bitch, there should have been some ostracism there. Maybe he would have fought a duel over it, Holmgang, or something like that. So yet again, this could have been referenced in a way that points out how progressive we've become and how, in fact, the central male character was standing up for, diverse rights. It would have brought a whole new dimension to the game and would have highlighted diversity and equality in a constructive way. There may well have been people who wanted progression in that era. But, women's rights, they do get fairly well. But just not, but only from the pagan Viking side of things. This is the next thing I wanted to talk about. Basically, in a Christian environment, openly homosexual characters would have probably been, at very least, ostracized, beaten to death, put on trial. That was just the way it was. It was frowned upon. You were seen as low if you were homosexual. It was seen against God, apparently. I won't get into the arguments there, but that is the basic premise. So whereas that kind of thing would have been frowned on, wouldn't have been frowned on, providing you were on top in pagan society, in Christian society, it was a no-no. For instance, the Christian king of East Anglia would have been very uncomfortable with his openly homosexual brother-in-law. Or bisexual, I don't know, they don't really go into the details. As for women's rights, yes, women could, in Norse pagan society, have equal rights to men. They could own property. We have the legend of the Valkyrie. Female warriors, it's been proved evidentially, may well have been a minor aspect of, or even a major aspect of Norse society. Yes. But I'll bet you that a female warrior would have had to have proved herself far more than a male one. Hence probably the legend of the Valkyrie, because only the very good and skilled and strong female warrior would have been accepted in such a male-dominated, aggressive society. On the other hand, Christian society would have totally frowned on the female character in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Women stayed at home. Women brewed ale. Women were supposed to be chaste and virtuous. And if someone in Christian society in that period did turn out to be what they would view as a freak or no abhorrence against nature, they would have either been ostracized, probably burnt as a witch, or sent to live the rest of their life in a nunnery. Or otherwise quietly disposed of. They would have been seen as heretical. Yet again, they could have written some kind of plot line where maybe the female character, I don't know if this happens, because please let me know in the comments if there is a plot line like this, stands up for the rights of a persecuted woman because she's different, maybe in the Christian side. And you could also have her involved in a dispute about land ownership, where a woman, a widow, is you know, someone is trying to con her out of land she has an absolute right to. Women also held the keys to the hall in the more upper class households. They would have organised the servants. They would have been in charge, and were often put in charge when the man was away. They had representation in local councils, but they had to get other men to do it for them most of the time. So there could have been ways in both cases where Ubisoft could have done this with a lot more sensibility, a lot more historical accuracy. I am learning to love Assassin's Creed Valhalla, by the way. Like I said, I haven't played it lately. Because I live in East Anglia, I have found reference to a lake in my original hometown of Needham Market. I have been to Sutton Hoo, which is just up the road. You know, and Thetford, which is in Norfolk, Thetford. Well, yes, I've been there too. And I must say, I mean, it hasn't changed much. It was a shithole in the time of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and to a certain extent it still is now. Sorry, Thetford, you know it's true. So yeah, this is just my summation. I have no problem, as I stated earlier in the video, of diversity and equality being pushed in contemporary or games set in the future. The Star Trek The Next Generation future is the one I dearly want for humanity. Call me naive, call me an idealist. You know? But pushing the kind of agendas we're seeing at the moment into historical games, historical movies, and any historical media, it just makes me feel incredibly uncomfortable as an amateur historian and historical reenactor. You are making people feel like no progress has been made towards equality and diversity because it was always like this. No, it wasn't. It wasn't until the early 20th century that women could vote in this country. Okay? You know, noble women in the Middle Ages had it, in a way, worse off than peasants, because they would be forced to marry any old king, prince or lord that their father, possibly with the collusion of the mother, thought would secure him an alliance or a piece of land. That was the way of it. And this is part of what they're doing. They are trying to make us push for change faster than it should be happening, and trying to convince us that the past was always like this, so we need to change more rapidly. It wasn't. And I think, to some extent, what these activists are doing is they are pushing people's boundaries so much and making people feel uncomfortable about the issue, to the extent that a lot, with far fewer brain cells, I would say, are attacking the very people these activists are trying to promote. We have seen a rise in hate crimes against people of diverse sexualities and genders and race in the UK, and it is partially their fault. I'm not saying that these horrible thugs that perpetrate these things aren't to blame, because they are. Both sides are as bad as the other. I think I've said all I need to say, but I recommend both games. I've got a friend who I regularly speak to in the park who's playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla at the moment. He's loving it. I cannot fault the gameplay, the look of the games. I can just fault the historical accuracy. Odyssey less, Valhalla more. But, you know, that's just my personal opinion. I mean, what do you think about the push for inclusivity in the gaming industry? What do you think about the historical accuracy of these games? What do you think about my views on the nature of the massive pushing of these agendas and what it ends up basically backfiring on the people it is supposed to be promoting? I don't know, you know, talk to me in the comments. Have a good day.